It is Bill Leff with you on WGN. And since Father's Day is coming up this Sunday, we wanted to talk about the magical bond between a father and his daughters. And to do that with us is Jim Bond. Jim is the editor of The Secret Life of Fathers, from intimate interviews with 101 fathers and daughters. Jim, how are you?
I'm terrific. How are you, Bill?
It's really great to talk to you. I have to tell you, because I'm 11 years old, my first inclination is to ask you about having the name James Bond, but I'm going to save that till later in the interview. Are you okay with that?
Absolutely. Well,
right,
you'd be the first one to mention it, actually.
It's the coolest name I've ever heard in my life. I've never talked to a guy whose name is Batman, so I'm pretty sure that you're going to have the coolest name of anybody ever. All right, we'll get to that in a little bit. How did you come up with the project? How did you come up with 101 fathers and daughters interviews? What happened?
Okay, well, this was a shock. I have a son and 3 daughters, and my 3 daughters are in their 20s. By the way, I hear you have 2 twins.
I do,
right?
yes.
Driving age? They just got their driver's license?
They're 16 years old, and as we speak, I'm taking Tylenol just to make sure that I don't my head doesn't explode.
I feel for you. That's all I could say.
Yeah, you've been through this. You know what it's like.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I have a son and 3 daughters. My 3 daughters are in their 20s. And my middle daughter, Lauren, when she was 22, just a few years ago, I heard this mean prank that the kids did with her when she was 6 years old.
What happened?
And we were renting a house that was butted up against a baseball field, a local baseball diamond. And it's dusk, so the lights from the field are shining in our yard.
Yeah.
And my son and my oldest daughter had the gate open just a touch, looking at the baseball game, and they called to Lauren and said, Lauren, come on here, you got to check this out. And Lauren said, no. I said, yeah, it'll just take a second, you got to check this out. There's something going on in the field. And she said, no, I just took a shower. They said, don't worry about it. Just come out here, it'll just take a second.
Yeah.
So she goes out in the backyard with a towel on, goes up to the fence and looks through the crack. They rip off the towel, push her onto the baseball field,
and
then close the fence.
Oh, no.
6 years old. Think about this. You're 6 years old. You're naked in front of the whole neighborhood with the light shining on you.
Oh.
So she turns around and knocks on the fence, and she says, let me back in. Guys, let me back in. And they wouldn't let her back in. So she had to walk all the way around the baseball field while everyone was watching her and around to the front to come into the house. Now, I heard this when she was 22, and I suddenly realized, wow, if this happened to my little baby when she was she was 6 years old, what else happened to her while she was growing up?
Yeah.
And I suddenly realized she was the quiet one, and I never really got to know her. And so I sent her an email, and I said, I feel like I haven't been that good a dad. My career got in the way and everything else, and you were so quiet that I never spent time with you. I never got to know you. And she sent me an email back, and she said, I've been waiting my whole life to hear this. And so after I picked myself off the floor, I wondered, am I the only dad of daughters that's this clueless about his relationship with his daughter? I mean, I thought I had a really good relationship with her, but as it turns out, it was in my mind. In her mind, we never had a relationship at all. And so besides spending more time with her, I wondered, what's the experience of other dads of daughters? And so I started asking other dads of daughters, just for feedback of what they're going through, so that I could be a better dad. And I ran a behavior management company, so I kind of learned how to ask questions that would get guys to speak up and actually say what's really going on.
Sure.
So what started out as a simple idea, it became a marathon, and I eventually had 101 dads. And it's just weird. Sometimes you might think, well, 101, well, what an odd number. We got to 101, and I couldn't buy an interview after that. It was just so strange. It was like it was meant to happen. And the guys started telling the personal stories, and the personal stories about what was going on in their lives and their feelings and what it's like being a dad of daughters. It helped me understand what dads are like and what I'm like, too. But it also started defining for me what men are really like, but they're carefully guarded images. I mean, I never realized, as guys, never let them see you sweat, and
sure.
It just all this stuff is embedded in us. I guess back from the days of the dinosaurs that you never show your emotions, and so as people were reading this, and listening to the interviews and then on the tapes and then reading them, they started encouraging me and they said, "You got to put this together in a book, because people got to read this stuff. This is like deep stuff." And so it became The Secret Life of Fathers. That's the name of the book. And when people read it, it's like eavesdropping on guys talking about their feelings.
Sure. Yep.
And it's just, and by the way, guess who really gets affected by this is women. Women read this stuff and they go, wow, because, women are daughters.
Yeah.
And they go, whoa, this is, I never knew this. I never knew guys feel.
Can I quickly, Jim, if you don't mind, just a follow-up question or two about your daughter, Lauren. You mentioned that she's kind of a little bit more shy and reserved. Is it because of that incident on the baseball field, do you think?
Somebody told me, I bet she doesn't like baseball.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's way above my pay grade, if you know what I mean. I think it's one of the things I used to, when I had my son and then my daughter and then our second daughter, I thought, well, all kids are the same. So I saw the personality of my son, and I figured, okay, kids are easy. I mean, my son didn't want to, he didn't like getting his hands dirty. And so what I realized was our second child was totally the opposite of the first child. And then the third one was totally opposite or very dramatically different from the second one. It isn't like they come in a mold and they're all the same. And so it just seemed that my oldest daughter is very ostentatious, and she's got a Facebook with like 2,000 people, and she knows them all on a first name basis. But Lauren is very, very different. In fact, my wife did something which was very clever, because they're kind of close in age, or just over a year in age, is because my older one, Morgan, is very ostentatious, and she's the life of the party and everything else. In middle school, she separated them and had them go to different schools. And the reason was because Lauren stopped having a personality. Well, didn't stop having a personality, but she became Morgan's sister. And everywhere she went, she was Morgan's sister instead of being Lauren. And so by separating that way, it was really great because, she got to develop totally on her own.
Here's what I know about that. I always envisioned when we found out we were having twins, my wife and I kind of had this idyllic picture of the two of them taking classes together and always being together through school. And in kindergarten, two different teachers said to my wife and I, what you need to do and you need to do soon is separate them either in classes or in schools, because they'll always have that weird relationship where there are two of them instead of one. And we thought about it and decided to do just that. And it really worked out to be a blessing.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah. Do the other girls, you had said how you had this conversation with her and you kind of suspected maybe you didn't know each other as well as you should have. Did the other girls and your son feel that way about you, or just Lauren?
Just Lauren and our youngest one, Aaron. Yeah. And I had this stupid idea. I guess guys get this. I learned that's one of the things that's really great about interviewing all these guys is I realized I'm not the only dad who's clueless. Okay, But so we had when Lauren, our youngest of three, was finally getting to kindergarten age. So my wife looked at me and went, "Aw, is that the last baby?" And so we figured, okay, let's have one more. And I got this stupid idea. I say stupid now. Yeah, the other and you know what? The other kids will raise her.
Sure, why not?
So if that ever it looked good on paper,
Sure.
But it was totally the opposite because they had their lives going forward, and she was a totally different generation. And so she's so much a different generation. She's 21 now, Lauren, Aaron, the youngest one. And they have a good relationship, so it's great. I mean, my kids have a really good relationship, but so I was trying to talk with her about, personal stuff, what's going on in your life, and she just didn't want to talk at 21. And so my wife says, "You don't get it. You have to text her." And I said, "She's like 4 feet away." She said, "Chris, trust me, text her." And so I started texting her, and she's giving me these long answers and telling me what's going on in her life. So then I finally said, "Well, the heck with this." So I said, "Hey, Aaron, this is really great what you're saying." She said, "Dad, I just don't want to talk," and she walked away.
Oh.
Then I went back to texting, and suddenly, she was comfortable giving me personal information. So it's complicated, this parenting thing.
Oh, yeah. And you would think after all these years it would get a little bit easier, but Jim, has it gotten a little bit easier?
No.
No, of course it hasn't.
Well, there are some things, though.
Well, do me a favor. Let's come back and find out what those things are. Jim Bond is my guest. He's the creator of the Father and Daughter Project. The website is thefatherdaughterproject.com. There's a book involved. You'll learn a lot. Stick around. I'll tell you more in a moment. It's WGN. It is Bill Leff on WGN, along with Jim Bond, who has never, ever in his life heard a comparison to James Bond. Ever, ever, ever. I will keep that streak alive tonight, for a little while anyway. Jim is the creator of the Father-Daughter Project, editor of The Secret Life of Fathers, from intimate interviews of 101 fathers and daughters. We were just saying how even after all these years, you're still learning a little bit, aren't you, Jim?
Oh, yeah. I will never say I'm an expert, because as soon as I say that, life comes at me.
Sure.
But I learned this thing. So my daughter Lauren, we're sitting at a dinner. She's about 22 at this point, and this thing happened to her where she lost her job for just no reason of her own, just a jerky boss and whatever. And then she ended up getting another job from somebody who recognized how really great she was. And so she's sitting there, and I start giving her advice. She got insulted, and she got up and she left. And everybody else said, wow, Lauren was rude. And it really troubled me. Like, why would she leave? And I started to realize, it took me a few days, and I called her and verified it, and it turned out that it was true. My giving her advice was like telling her that she's stupid. What she really wanted to hear was, you're so smart, you're so wonderful, I know you can do this, I'm so proud of you, and hug her. And instead, here's Dad giving her advice. Now, I was a consultant for a lot of my life, so my job was about, tell me your problem, I'll give you, the answer.
Sure.
But I suddenly realized my whole life was about giving her advice. And that's how I tried to get close to her, by showing her I love her, by giving her advice, when in fact I really wasn't trying to show her I love her. I was trying to show her how smart Daddy is. Hey, Daddy's so smart. Let me show you how smart Daddy is. He'll solve your problems. And I suddenly became really embarrassed that I realized my whole relationship, I was pushing her away rather than embracing her and bringing her closer.
But don't you think most people would have followed that exact same avenue that you did? I would have.
Yep. Absolutely. And it gave me comfort interviewing the dads, because I had in different phases. That some dads would say, I try to get really close to my daughter, and the closer I try to get, the more she seems to move away. And other dads that said, I tried to get close to my daughter, and I figured this thing out that I have to stop giving her advice. And so as I heard that, it started giving me comfort, because I went, oh, okay, I see this. But, I get an autopilot. Maybe you do too. I think a lot of guys do that. We love solving problems. We're good at solving problems, just as guys, and it just, for daughters, for women in our lives, but for daughters, it's not always what they want. What they want is, for us to listen.
Sure. Of course. Now, in almost any given situation, Jim, because you've raised both a son and 3 daughters, do you handle situations dramatically differently because one of the girls is a girl, as opposed to the way you would have handled it if it had been your son?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I talked to my son, Jordan. Jordan's in the Navy now. And it's like, hey, Jordan, how's it going on the phone? Not too bad. Anything doing? Not too much. Okay, great. Hang up. Oh, I had a great conversation with Jordan. With my daughters, it's like TMI, too much information.
On whose end? Are you giving them too much information, or are they giving you too much?
They're giving me too much. But so here's one. So I'm coaching soccer, okay? And I coach my son in hockey and all that stuff. And by the way, the Hawks are awesome. Anyway,
thank you.
Just pass.
Thank you.
And this is from a Los Angeles fan, okay? But except, what's the deal with I don't want to get into the name Taves? It's Toews.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're confusing us.
Sorry.
But anyway,
I'll tell him. I'll call him when this interview is over. I will call him and tell him he's got to fix that.
Really.
I'll say James Bond said your name is weird. He'll understand.
Yeah, right. I should talk, right? But so I'm coaching soccer, girls soccer.
Yeah.
And so the girls in practice, they said, can we scrimmage with the boys? And I said, oh yeah, sure. I'll go over to the coach and I'll talk to him and find out. And he said, oh yeah, sure. Girls love to, especially in sports, they love to play against the boys, especially at a young age. So I come back to them. I said, yep, the coach said, yeah, we can do it if you're ready. And they said, sure. So I said, let's go. So I start walking across the field, and I'm walking across the field. And then I realized there doesn't seem to be any girls with me. And I turn around and I look, and they're putting makeup on.
Oh.
This is soccer.
You
They're
don't
like
put
13,
soccer
14
on.
years old.
You don't put makeup on in soccer. What are they doing?
They're girls.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. It's at that moment that I realized, wait a second, this is not guys.
No, it's not. Can I tell you, one of my daughter Kylie played softball for several years, and one day after a softball game, as we're sitting in the car, it's my wife and myself and I'm explaining to her something that she could have done differently at the bat. I said, there's a way you can hold your shoulders up a little bit higher on a pitch and stuff like that, and she just kept saying, Dad, like that. Every time I tell her something, she'd go, Dad, like that. And I kept thinking back to when I was a kid playing Little League, how my dad would give me little insights. Don't swing at a 3-0 pitch. And,
Right.
There's a certain way you can aim yourself so the ball will go a certain way. And I always liked getting that information. But for my daughter, that was not a good thing. And I told other dads this on the team. And one of the dads said, are you kidding me? You can't tell them anything about baseball. They're not going to listen to you. But I played baseball for 10 years. Wouldn't they listen to me? No.
No, they're not. They're not wired the same as we are.
It's a little bit different. And I've also talked about this, Jim, on the show several times. Both of my daughters, whenever they would play any sport, whether they won or lost, had no bearing at all on them. They just didn't care.
Yeah, right.
But we're different that way, too, aren't we?
Yeah, I had one of my youngest daughter, Erin, playing soccer, and suddenly the ball starts coming towards her, and she's busy in a conversation with somebody. It's like, Erin, the ball's coming. Oh, okay.
Yep.
So, but my older daughters were fierce competitors in that we have a city nearby that is really just a lot of rough characters. And anybody messes with one of the girls on the team, man, I'll tell you, they were brutal.
Really?
Yeah, they would just don't mess with a girl on my team because, and it's a relationship thing. It's like if you did something bad to one of the girls on my team, you're going to pay for it. So,
wow,
it's a relationship.
How about that? All right, stick around. We've got the news coming up next, and then more with Jim Bond, the creator of the Father-Daughter Project. His website is thefatherdaughterproject.com. We'll pick this up in just a little bit. It's WGN. I've got Jim Bond on with me, the creator of the Father-Daughter Project. His website is thefatherdaughterproject.com. You interviewed 101 fathers and daughters. Is this correct?
Yes.
Was there something that you found more in common than not? Was there one kind of a string that went through these that you didn't really think would be there, but when you were all done, you thought, wow, there is something in common with all these fathers and daughters? Yeah.
There were a few things. We need to be heroic as dads, as men. It's really important for us to be, we can relate to Johnny Depp or, as a swashbuckler. So we've got that heroism. And a lot of the dads, even though they had difficulty connecting with their daughter, you'd hear them say if their daughter was in trouble or something happened, this sense of pride and happiness, she came to me so I could help her. And so there was that piece. But there's also, and I felt this when I heard guys start saying this, I really had to examine whether this was true for me, and I realized it was in a way. My daughters help with this, but a lot of guys said that they were afraid of women. One guy said, I don't know, he used the term, I don't know the rules of engagement. He said, with guys, I know the rules of engagement, but with women, it's really tough to understand the rules of engagement because they can cry, they can, they've got all these tools, these emotional things that they could do that we're not prepared for. We either don't want to talk. We have two volumes for if we're faced with something we don't want to interact with or we don't want to show an emotion. Like let's say somebody hurts our feelings. We have two volumes, loud and off.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Either I'm going to be quiet and just let it pass because I don't want to get into this, or I'm going to deflect somehow. Some people do it by, jokes. Mm-hmm. And one of my brothers does that. And he's really great at jokes, and it took him a while for him to finally recognize that if you talk about something I don't want to talk about, I'm going to come up with a joke and deflect you off the topic so we don't have to stay on this topic.
Right.
But some guys will just, they'll holler or, what are you talking about and all this. But so those were a couple.
Well, don't you also find that men only can talk about sports and sex and food and then we're kind of out of stuff to say, but women can talk about things all day long. It doesn't matter. It's amazing.
Okay, so let me give you an example of something, okay?
All right.
It's true, but the fallacy, the error that women make is because we don't talk about stuff, they feel like we don't have feelings.
Yeah.
And guys' feelings are really easily hurt. So let me give you an example of something. It's a little off the wall, but here we go, okay?
All right, sure.
So I'm sitting with a bunch of guys, and I asked the question, okay? A dog knows you love him because you walk him, you give him hugs, and you give him treats, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, how does a daughter or any female know you love her? And so after a bunch of laughter, they said, well, we walk her, we hug her, and we give her treats, right? Then the bigger question comes up, does your daughter really know you love her? And it was surprising. It took a few minutes because it was really a tough question for guys to answer.
Yeah.
And then guys started explaining that they want to talk to their daughter or the women in their lives, and it's easier with the daughter because you have that closer relationship till death do you part, even more than a spouse, by the way, or a girlfriend. We want to talk to daughters, but sometimes it's really tough expressing our feelings. But every one of them agreed if you give us a nudge, if you ask the right questions, the floodgates open wide. But you got to get us started because we want to talk. We want to share feelings with you. You know, we don't want to become women because guys are guys. I mean, there's just, you know, women's lib, all this stuff kind of. I was reading this thing in Inc. magazine, a business magazine, talking about how, you know, the best qualities of men are, you know, and it lists all these female traits.
Yeah.
And it says we don't want to turn guys into women, but, you know, they need to turn more into women. Well, that's true, but it's not really true. Maybe that's why I love hockey. You know, I'm from Montreal originally, so I have to love hockey. It's in my DNA. It's just, you know, I hear people saying hockey, you know, well, they're fighting. You know, there's just too much fighting in hockey. And so I look at them and go, that's hockey. Get over it, you know.
Right.
Because somehow it's built into us that there are, you know, even if you look at, you know, what's the symbol of America? It's the olive branch and the spears. You've got to have both. Mm-hmm. And so what makes it, you know, what makes America great is we've got the voice of women and of men, and we get the best of both. But so it is a complicated time to be a guy.
But how do you figure out what that right question or questions are, Jen? There must be some way you can figure that out to kind of ease into that conversation. Do you know what those questions are?
Yes, I have a book.
Oh, that's right.
But we have a website. So let me make this statement first, okay?
Sure, go on.
For all the women that are out there, okay, for all the women out there, is it possible that the men in your life, starting with your own dad, want to have a better relationship with you, but they don't know how? Well, somehow we seem to have lucked onto a powerful way to do that, and it's for the daughter to interview the dad. And you don't have to buy the book. I mean, hopefully you guys will buy the book because I need it, you know. Mm-hmm. No, but we have it on the website. It's free, okay? So come to the Father-Daughter Project website. There's a section that says free stuff, and you'll find the questions. You can download them for the different types of, you know, if it's a divorced dad or a, you know, adopted child or whatever, and whatever else. But it's amazing that people sit down, women of all ages, and talk to their dads. And the dads start opening up and telling stuff. It's like the story I was just telling about the dog thing.
Sure.
If you ask dads, if you just ask them outright, you know, here's one of the questions we ask. If this was the last day on earth and you could say anything, what would you want to tell your daughter? What would you want to tell me that you've never told me before? Now, if you just ask them straight out of the box, a guy's going to go like, what? You know?
Sure.
But if you set it up, if you start asking some questions beforehand, and just to get them comfortable with answering the questions, then dads are very comfortable, guys are very comfortable answering the questions. And so what we did was I amassed these questions that I wanted to find out for myself too, mm-hmm. what's going on inside the heart and the minds of guys. And from that, I recognized, why don't we do this in a way that's easy for them to answer? So we start with, talk about your childhood and your relationship with your mom and your dad and what was that like, and sort of go forward. And by going through the process, it becomes really easy and fun for dads. And I'll tell you that there were dads that I talked to that, most of the dads never tell their daughter any of this stuff, but they told me this, a stranger, and then they realized right after the call, they said, I got to call my daughter. Mm-hmm. I mean, I got to call. We have one of the guys who's one of the most powerful attorneys in the country, and I didn't know what I was getting into. When he got on the phone, he went, okay, what I got myself into here, and I figured I'm really screwed. I'm glad I was on the phone and not face-to-face because he would have seen fear in me, okay? But I went through the questions, and 2/3 of the way through it, he starts crying.
Wow. And
he recognizes, he has an adopted daughter, He has a son, daughter, and an adopted daughter. And the adopted daughter went through a bout of alcoholism and a little bit of and drugs, but she recovered. And part of why she recovered, the main reason she recovered, I mean, she has to want it in herself, but the main reason she recovered was because of her older brother and sister, his biological kids. They wouldn't let their sister fall through the cracks. And so first, when he started describing it, he said, oh, her, okay, let me go through the story with her. But then as I started taking him through his relationship with her and the things that happened, he started crying, and he realized it was such a funny thing for him to say. He said, I never realized it before, but before her, my family was basically boring.
Wow.
You know,
How
everything was going great. And she defined us. I'm so proud of my kids because they wouldn't let their sister fall through the crack. They were there for her. I mean, they recognized that it had to be her, but they were there for her. And he realized she's the glue that holds us together as a family. But where does that come from? It comes from asking questions, you know? I mean, especially because his first instinct was, oh, her. And then as I went through the story, he started realizing, oh, I mean, he's one that said, you know, as soon as I'm done with are we almost done with this? Because I got to call her. You know, I got to call her and tell her I love her. I got to tell her how proud I am of her. Well, and it just came out of asking these questions.
What an amazing realization. We're going to continue our conversation with Jim Bond, the creator of the Father-Daughter Project. Visit the website, thefatherdaughterproject.com. Get the book. It's all right there at the website. We'll explain more in a moment. It's WGN. My guest is Jim Bond, creator of the Father-Daughter Project. He interviewed 101 fathers and daughters. The results are in a great book. It'd make a nice Father's Day gift. Visit the website, thefatherdaughterproject.com. Jim, before we had our girls, we didn't know if they were going to be boys or girls. We knew that we were going to have twins, and that's all we knew. And in my head, I kept thinking, because I didn't have any sisters, I won't know what to do to fill a day with girls. If I have boys, I know 1,000 things that I can do that will last all day long if I want to, but I'll have no idea how to fill a day with my two girls if I have them. And then I had them, and I never had to worry about that again because somehow it all fit into place.
Right. And that's, you know, when one of the guys we interviewed was a 9/11 fireman, and he was funny because, well, let me start with this. When I found out my wife was pregnant with our son, when I found out my wife was pregnant, I suddenly got a panic attack, and I went, this is like a puppy that if you don't like it, you could bring it back to the pound. You know, this is a human being that's going to be connected with me for my entire life.
Yeah.
And it was almost overwhelming. It was like scary. But when I was holding, you know, when you hold your child in your hands, and it's great with daughters because a lot of guys, we screw up our relationships when we open our mouths and start talking.
Sure.
But the good news is with a baby, you can't screw up the relationship because they know how you feel. It doesn't matter what the words are. You know, if I could look at my daughter and I could say, "Oh, you're beautiful. You look just like Winston Churchill." You know, don't say that. She doesn't care. She knows what I mean. You know, because it's a baby and she's kind of learning how to talk while I'm learning how to talk as a father.
As a side note, did your baby look like Winston Churchill? Because that's not good.
Very much so.
That's never good.
Turned out okay, though.
But it's an unconditional love, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And something happens. So I have this one guy that I was talking to, one of the guys I interviewed, and this guy, after his wife gave birth, you know, the baby was crying and she was having postpartum depression and whatever, and he decided he was going to split. He wasn't going to, you know, just hang around. And so, but he didn't want to totally abandon them, so he said every week he would come out there and he would spend time with his daughter. But after a while, after about 4 or 5 months, he said he started realizing that he's play acting. He's doing what his dad did. His dad was like an absentee dad. And what am I doing? I'm doing the same thing. I hated my dad that he was never there, and here I'm doing the same thing. He said what really changed, and it was holding her. When I would hold her, something weird, magical happened that I realized here's this little person who's looking at me. And I have a son and daughter, so I saw the difference with my son and daughters. My son would love to play with toys and everything else. My daughters love to look at me. And look, you know, they're staring. Hey, you know, Pam's my wife. Pam, she's staring at me. What do I do? Don't worry about it. Yeah, but she's like staring at me. What do I do? The relationship is really so powerful because it's nonverbal to start with, And here's this human being, and I think we play really good mentors as fathers. It's kind of fun. Look, I got her to take her first step. I got her to drive the bicycle. I mean, how many dads taught their daughter how to drive the bicycle, or now with driving a car? I don't know if you're teaching them, but just there's a joy that comes from, we know how to do this stuff. We can pass this on to a daughter. It's just fantastic. You can't. And to someone who doesn't have a daughter or doesn't have kids, it's so hard to describe. It's so hard to describe the relationship because you are connected till death do you part.
Yeah, sure.
I heard this thing on public radio. This lady who's
what's public radio? I've never heard of this. What is public radio?
Yeah, I know. I shouldn't say. Whatever. anyway, this lady was a product of a test tube baby.
Yeah.
Okay, she's a test tube baby.
Yeah.
So her father was a sperm donor, basically.
Yep.
So what she did was she spent all this time. She spent literally 5 years trying to track down her real father. She would go look through for a university the yearbook to see if any of the men looked like her. I mean, it's just so weird that it's wired into us. Steve Jobs had it, and it's funny. Steve Jobs and his sister Mona Simpson, and the two of them wanted to find out who their parents were. But she wanted to connect with who her father was, and Steve Jobs didn't want to have anything to do with him. But it's the daughter that wants to reach out and just, find that connection. Who am I connected to? How am I connected?
Jim, we've gotten through the whole interview. I've not even asked you about the name James Bond. Just really quick, your mom and dad knew what they were doing, didn't they?
I think they were just really mean. I think they had a sense of humor, so what can I say?
But now, even if you want to go into a bar and get a martini, you can't even order it shaken and not stirred because everybody will just go, well sure, of course, right?
Yeah, it's a shaky proposition when I go to a bar. What can I say?
And if your family physician's name is Dr. No, you got to go somewhere else. You understand that, too, don't you?
Yeah.
Of course you do. Jim Bond is the creator of the Father-Daughter Project. He's pulling for our Blackhawks. I like him just for that alone. His website is thefatherdaughterproject.com. Jim, have a happy Father's Day. Thanks for joining us.
You too. Thank you very much.
All right, take care. We'll be back right after the news. A lot more ahead. It's WGN.